The red dust swirled across the empty land like angry ghosts. 2 suns hung in the pale sky above Kepler 442b, but their light brought no hope to the dying world below. In the ruins of what was once a great city, tall blue creatures moved slowly through broken streets. Their skin looked like colored glass, and when the light hit them just right, they sparkled like diamonds. But there was no beauty left in their world. These were the Zephyrians, and they were dying. Kim Tae wiped sweat from his face as he stepped out of the human transport ship. The heat hit him like a wall, and the dry air made his throat burn. Around him, his fellow humans complained about the weather and checked their equipment. They had come here to make deals with the aliens, to trade human goods for the amazing technology that could bend light and reshape metal with just a thought. But Tae was not looking at the broken machines or the glowing crystals that powered them. He was looking at the ground. Water was here once, he said to himself, kneeling down to touch the cracked earth. His fingers traced patterns in the dirt that told stories of ancient rivers and lakes. Lots of water. His teammate Lee Soo walked over, carrying a heavy case of trade samples. "Stop playing in the dirt, Tae. We have work to do." But Tae pulled out a small device that beeped and clicked as he pointed it at the ground. The readings made his eyes grow wide. Under all this dead land, his machine was telling him something incredible. Water. Not just a little bit, but huge amounts of it, flowing in underground rivers that the aliens had never found. A tall Zephyrian approached them. His name was Morvel, and he was the leader of what was left of his clan. Once, hundreds of his people had lived in this city. Now, only 30 remained. His blue skin had turned pale, and cracks showed where the drought had damaged his body. "Human visitors," Morvel said in perfect English. His voice sounded like wind chimes, beautiful but sad. "You come to trade with the dying. How kind." Tae stood up and brushed the dirt off his hands. "You're not dying. You just forgot how to drink." Morvel's large eyes, which were silver like mirrors, focused on the human. "We have searched every corner of our world for water. Our machines can split atoms and move mountains, but they cannot create what does not exist." "It does exist," Tae said, pointing at the ground, "right under your feet." The alien leader made a sound that might have been laughter, if laughter could break glass. "Ah, yes. The human thinks we should dig holes like animals. How wonderfully primitive." Other Zephyrians gathered around to listen. Some were so weak they could barely stand. Their children, small versions of the adults with skin like blue crystal, clung to their parents with desperate hope. But when they heard Tae talking about digging, they shook their heads. "We are not cave creatures," said an old female named Vexhai. "We are builders of light and shapers of matter. We do not burrow in the dirt." Tae looked around at the dying city, at the empty fountains and dried-up gardens. These people had technology that seemed like magic to humans, but they were too proud to try the simplest solution of all. "Your ancestors built the city above a river," Tae explained, pulling out his tablet to show them the readings. "When the climate changed and the surface water disappeared, the river didn't die. It just went underground. All that water is still here, flowing beneath us in huge underground streams." Morvel studied the human device, but the numbers meant nothing to him. "Even if this is true, we have no way to reach such depths. Our tools are not made for digging." "Mine are," Tae said with a smile. That night, while his fellow humans slept in their ship, Tae sat outside looking at the stars. The Zephyrians had given them a place to stay in one of the few buildings that still had power. Through the walls, he could hear the aliens talking in their musical language. They were debating whether to trust this strange human who wanted to dig holes in their sacred ground. In the morning, Lee Soo found Tae already working. He had unpacked a drilling machine and was setting it up in the middle of the city's main square. "What are you doing?" Lee Soo asked. "We're supposed to be negotiating trade deals, not whatever this is." "This is the most important trade deal in history," Tae replied, checking his instruments. "They give me permission to dig one hole. In return, I give them their world back." Morvel appeared with several other clan leaders. They watched with curiosity as Tae assembled his machine. It looked crude compared to their advanced technology, just metal and motors and spinning parts. "If you find nothing," Morvel said, "you'll stop this foolishness and discuss proper business with us." "And if I find water?" The alien leader's silver eyes grew bright for just a moment. Then perhaps we will listen to more of your primitive wisdom. Tay started the machine, and it began to bite into the hard ground. The Zephyrians gathered to watch, some laughing at the crude human technology, others hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, this strange visitor might save them all. The drilling machine roared to life in the center of the old city square. Black smoke puffed from its engine as the metal bit started spinning and biting into the hard ground. Tay stood next to it, watching the numbers on his screen and adjusting controls. Sweat ran down his face, but his eyes never left the readings. Around him, more Zephyrians had gathered to watch. Word spread through the dying city that the human was trying something no one had ever attempted before. Some laughed at the crude machine with its loud noises and dirty smoke. Others whispered prayers to their ancient gods. "Look how it destroys the ground," said Vexhai, shaking her head. "So violent and messy. Our tools shape matter with gentle precision." "Your gentle tools didn't find water," Tay called back without looking up from his controls. A young Zephyrian named Jean Ko pushed through the crowd. She was barely an adult, with skin that still held some of its natural blue glow. "What if he is right?" she asked the others. "What if water is down there and we just never thought to look?" The older aliens shushed her quickly. Such talk was dangerous hope, and hope had killed many of their people over the long years of drought. The drill went deeper. 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters. The Zephyrians began to grow restless. Some started to walk away, convinced that the human was wasting everyone's time. But Morvel stayed, watching Tay's face for any sign of success or failure. "How deep will you go?" the clan leader asked. "As deep as it takes," Tay replied, wiping his hands on a dirty cloth. "The water is there." "I know it is." At 40 meters, the drill hit something different. The machine's sound changed, becoming deeper and more strained. Tay checked his instruments and smiled. The ground was getting softer, which meant they were getting close to the old underground riverbed. "Something is happening," Jean Ko whispered to her friends. "The human looks excited." Lee Sue had been watching from the shade of their transport ship. Now he walked over, carrying bottles of water from their supplies. "You've been at this for 6 hours, Tay. Maybe it's time to admit this isn't working." But Tay shook his head and kept drilling. 50 meters. 60 meters. The crowd of Zephyrians had grown larger again as news spread that the drill was still working. Even the sick ones had come out to see what the human was doing. At 70 meters, Tay's instruments started beeping faster. His heart began to race as he read the numbers. The ground composition was changing again. They were close now, very close. "Stand back," he called the crowd, but most of the Zephyrians didn't understand why. At 87 meters, everything changed. The drill broke through into an underground cavern, and water exploded up to the hole like a geyser. It shot high into the air, sparkling in the light of the two suns, before falling back down like rain on the amazed crowd. The Zephyrians stood frozen in shock. Water. Real, clean, beautiful water was shooting up from the ground right in front of them. Some of them had not seen this much water in their entire lives. Jean Ko was the first to move. She ran forward and cupped her hands under the flowing water. When she tasted it, her whole body began to glow brighter than it had in years. "It's pure," she cried out. "It's perfect." Then the others rushed forward. Old and young, weak and strong, they all pushed toward the water. They drank from their hands, splashed it on their faces, and some even lay down in the growing puddles just to feel wetness against their skin. Morvel approached slowly, as if he was afraid the water might disappear if he moved too fast. When he reached the well, Tay handed him a metal cup filled with the clear liquid. "This is impossible," Morvel whispered, but he drank it anyway. The moment the water touched his lips, the cracks in his skin began to heal. His pale blue color grew deeper and more vibrant. "No," Tay said, turning off his machine. "This is just engineering." The clan leader stared at the human with new respect. "You have given us life itself. How can we repay such a gift?" "Teach me about your technology," Tay replied, "and let me teach you about mine. I think we can help each other build a lot more wells." By evening, The news had spread to every corner of the dying city and beyond. The human had found water where the mighty Zephyrians had failed. Clans from distant settlements sent messengers asking if the miracle was real. Some even began the dangerous journey to see for themselves. But not everyone was happy about the discovery. In the distant Highland clans, Lord Vexnoth heard the news with anger. For generations, his family had controlled the last natural spring on the continent. People paid him tribute for access to water, and that tribute kept his clan powerful while others grew weak. This human threatens everything we have built, he told his advisors. If every settlement can have its own water, what use would they have for us? But in the old city, such dark thoughts seemed impossible. The Zephyrians celebrated through the night, dancing around their new well as clean water flowed endlessly from the ground. They had been saved by a human who knew how to dig holes, and for the first time in decades, they had hope for tomorrow. 3 weeks after the first well started flowing, Tay had more work than he could handle alone. Every day, messengers arrived from distant settlements begging him to come dig wells for their dying clans. Some offered payment in precious metals. Others promised rare crystals, but most had nothing to give except their desperate hope. Tay sat in Morvell's rebuilt council chamber, studying maps of the continent while planning his next moves. The room buzzed with activity as Zephyrians came and went, carrying reports about water levels and equipment needs. What had started as one human with a drilling machine was growing into something much bigger. "We cannot help everyone at once," Morvell said, pointing to dozens of red marks on the map where settlements needed wells. "There are too many, and the distances are too great." "Then we need more people who know how to do this work," Tay replied. He looked up at Jean Ko, who had become his constant assistant over the past weeks. "How fast can you learn to operate the drilling equipment?" The young Zephyrian's eyes went wide. "You would teach me your human secrets?" "They're not secrets," Tay laughed. "They're just skills. And you're already better at reading the underground maps than most of my people back on Earth." Within days, Jean Ko was operating a second drilling machine that Tay had requested from a human ship. Her quick mind grasped the concepts easily, and her natural Zephyrian ability to sense molecular structures helped her understand water flow better than any human could. Their first joint project was at the settlement of Velcari, a 2-day journey across the desert. The clan there was down to 15 members, all of them sick from drinking contaminated water from a polluted pond. When Tay and Jean Ko arrived with their equipment, the clan leader barely had strength to greet them. "We have nothing to pay you with," the leader wheezed. "Our ancestors' treasures were sold long ago for drops of clean water. We're not asking for payment," Tay said, setting up his machine. "We're asking for students." By the end of the week, they had drilled a well that produced more clean water than the settlement had seen in 50 years. But more importantly, they had trained 3 young Zephyrians in basic well maintenance and water management. Each settlement they helped became a training ground for more workers. The success at Velcari brought them to the attention of Parkmin, a brilliant engineer from the northern clans. She had heard stories about the human who could find water anywhere, and she traveled for 10 days to meet him. When she saw Jean Ko operating human drilling equipment while using Zephyrian molecular sensors to guide the drill, she knew this was something revolutionary. "Teach me everything," Parkman demanded on her first day. "I want to understand both technologies." She proved to be Tay's best student. Within a month, she had figured out how to combine human drilling techniques with Zephyrian matter manipulation to create wells that were twice as efficient as anything either species could build alone. Her improvements allowed them to reach deeper water sources and pump more volume with less energy. But their growing success was creating enemies. Lord Vexnoth of the Highland clans watched the expansion with growing alarm. 4 or 5 generations, his family had controlled water access across the continent. People traveled hundreds of miles to reach his natural spring, paying heavy tribute for the privilege of filling their containers. This system had made his clan wealthy and powerful while keeping others dependent. "This human is destroying our way of life," Vexnoth told his war council. "Every well he digs makes us less necessary. Soon, no one will come to pay tribute at our spring." His advisors nodded gravely. They had already seen the signs. Fewer travelers on the roads to their territory, less tribute flowing into their treasury. Some settlements that had paid them for decades were now completely self-sufficient. "What do you propose we do?" asked his military commander. "We remind people why the old ways were better." Vexnoth replied with a cold smile. Meanwhile, Tay was facing a different kind of problem. His success had attracted the attention of other human corporations who wanted to profit from his water empire. Corporate representatives from Earth had started arriving, offering him funding in exchange for exclusive drilling rights. "Think about the possibilities," said Director Hayes from Terra Mining Consortium. "We could industrialize this entire operation, mass-produce drilling equipment, train hundreds of workers, expand to other planets. You could be wealthy beyond imagination." But Tay shook his head. "This isn't about getting rich. It's about helping people who are dying of thirst." "Don't be naive," Hayes pressed. "Business and charity can work together. We provide the resources, you provide the expertise. Everyone wins." That night, Tay discussed the offer with his growing team. Parkman and Gene Ko had become his closest advisors, and several other Zephyrians had joined their core group of well-builders. "The humans from your world think differently than you do," Parkman observed. "They see profit where you see problems to solve." "That's exactly why we need to be careful," Tay replied. "The moment we turn this into a business, we lose control of who gets help and who doesn't." His decision to reject the corporate offers would soon prove wise. 3 days later, the first attacks began. Wells that had been providing clean water for weeks suddenly stopped working. Equipment disappeared in the night. And in some cases, the water itself was poisoned with chemicals that made it deadly to drink. The war for water had begun, and Tay realized that building wells was only half the battle. The other half was protecting them from those who preferred scarcity to abundance. The sun was just rising when Tay arrived at the Velcari settlement to find chaos. The well that had been flowing with clean water for 2 months was now surrounded by sick and angry Zephyrians. A thick, oily substance floated on top of the water, and the smell made everyone cover their faces. Jean Ko knelt beside the contaminated well, her scanner beeping wildly. "Someone poured industrial chemicals down the shaft," she reported, her voice tight with anger. "The entire water system is poisoned." Old Kevhal, the settlement leader who had been healthy and strong since the well was built, now lay on a stretcher. His blue skin had turned gray, and his breathing was shallow. "We drank from it this morning before we noticed the smell," he whispered. 5 of our children are very sick." Tay felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Can you clean it?" Parkman arrived on her transport vehicle, bringing medical supplies from their main base. "It will take weeks to flush all the poison out," she said after examining the well. "And we'll need to drill deeper to reach clean water again." Who would do this? Jean Ko asked, but they all knew the answer. This was the 4th attack in 10 days. Wells had been sabotaged across the continent, always in the same way. Someone with knowledge of both human and Zephyrian technology was targeting their water systems with surgical precision. That afternoon, a message arrived from Lord Vexnoth of the Highland clans. It was delivered by a scared messenger who refused to stay for a reply. To the human called Tay, the message read, "Your interference in our world has gone too far. Return to your ship and leave our planet, or watch everything you have built turn to poison. Some prices are too high to pay for progress." Tay crumpled the message and threw it in the dirt. Around him, his team of Zephyrian engineers waited for his response. Over the past months, more than 50 settlements had received clean water wells. Thousands of aliens who would have died were now healthy and strong. But Vexnotha's attacks were undoing all their work. "We could ask for protection from your human military," suggested Li Su, who had finally started helping with the well projects after seeing their success. "No," Tay said firmly. "The moment we bring human soldiers here, this becomes a conquest instead of cooperation." That's exactly what Vexnoth wants people to think. Parkman studied the maps of recent attacks. He's being smart about his targets. He only hits settlements that are far from our main base, places where we can't respond quickly. "Then we need be smarter," Tay replied. "Jean Ko, send messages to all the settlements with wells. Tell them we're implementing emergency protocols." The next morning, Tay made a decision that would change everything. He called a meeting of all the clan leaders who had received wells from his team. Representatives from 30 settlements traveled to the old city, some of them risking attack from Vexnatha's raiders just to attend. "We have given you clean water," Tay told the assembled leaders. "But Lord Vexnath believes he can take it away by poisoning a few wells. I think it's time he learned the real cost of his actions." Morvel leaned forward in his chair. "What do you propose?" "A water embargo," Tay said simply. "No new wells for the Highland clans. No maintenance on their existing systems. No technical support of any kind. If Vexnath wants to play with poison, he can do it without our help." An old female leader named Yextra raised her hand. "But they're innocent people in the Highland territories. Children who need clean water. And there are innocent children here who are dying from Vexnatha's poison," Parkman replied sharply. "How many of our settlements must suffer before we defend ourselves?" The debate continued for hours, but eventually the vote was clear. The Highland clans would be cut off from all water support until their attack stopped. Within days, the effects were obvious. The Highland clans had 3 old wells that barely produced enough water for drinking. Their leaders had never bothered to learn modern water management because they could always take tribute from other settlements. Now, as their population grew and their old wells began to fail, they found themselves in desperate need of help. But that help was no longer available. Refugees began arriving at settlements with Tay's wells. They came in small groups at first. Families who had quietly left the Highland territories in search of clean water. Then larger groups started moving, entire clans abandoning their ancestral homes. "Vexnath is losing control," reported Hackvell, a Highland refugee who had joined Tay's engineering team. "His own advisors are questioning why they're fighting a war they cannot win." The attacks on wells stopped completely after 3 weeks. But Tay knew this was only the beginning. Vexnath had built his power on controlling water access, and he would not give up easily. The old lord had been forced to retreat, but men like him always found new ways to fight. Late at night, as Tay reviewed security reports from their scattered well sites, he realized something important. He had come to this world as an engineer looking to solve a simple problem. But solving that problem had made him something else entirely. The Zephyrians now looked to him not just for water, but for leadership. He was becoming the ruler of an empire he had never intended to build. 5 years had passed since Tay first struck water in the old city square. Now he stood on the observation deck of his orbital station, watching cargo ships move between the planet's surface and the growing space colonies. Below him, the once-dead world sparkled with green forests and silver rivers that flowed from thousands of wells scattered across every continent. The transformation had been incredible. Cities that were ruins when he arrived now bustled with activity. Farms covered land that had been barren desert. The Zephyrian population, which had been dropping toward extinction, was growing again for the first time in a century. Cho Hyun, his human administrative assistant, approached with the daily reports. She had come to the planet 2 years ago as part of a refugee group from another failed colony. Now she helped manage the complex network of water systems that kept an entire world alive. "The Galactic Council made their decision," she told him, handing over an official document. "You're now formally recognized as the Water Authority of Kepler 442b. They're calling you the first human to rule an alien world through peaceful means." Tay laughed at the title. "I don't rule anything. I just know where to dig holes." But the truth was more complicated than that, and they both knew it. Every major decision on the planet now went through Tay's office. Not because he demanded it, but because everything important required water, and water required his approval. When the northern clans wanted to build a new city, they needed Tay's engineers to design the water systems. When the southern territories planned new farms, they needed his permission to drill irrigation wells. When disputes arose between settlements, they brought them to him because he controlled the resource that made life possible. Parkman entered the room carrying a tablet full of engineering reports. She had become the head of the Zephyrian Water Corps, training hundreds of alien engineers in the techniques that Tay had taught her years ago. Her improvements to well technology had made water extraction so efficient that they were now exporting clean water to other planets. Lord Vexnoth is here for his appointment, she announced with a small smile. The old Highland Lord had requested this meeting after months of negotiation. His clan had finally run out of options. Their ancient wells had dried up completely, and his people were leaving in larger numbers every week. Those who stayed were entirely dependent on water shipments from settlements that Tay controlled. Vexnoth entered the room looking much older than when Tay had first seen him. The proud alien's crystalline skin had lost its luster, and his movements were slow and careful. Behind him walked a small group of advisors, all of them looking nervous. Human Tay, Vexnoth said formally, I come to discuss terms. Just Tay is fine, Tay replied, gesturing the chairs around a conference table. What kind of terms did you have in mind? My clan wishes to join your water network. We have territory and resources that could benefit your expansion. In return, we need access to your well technology. It was surrender disguised as a business proposal, and everyone in the room understood that. The mighty Highland clans, who had controlled water access for generations, were asking for help from a human they had tried to destroy. Tay studied the old lord carefully. What about your attacks on our wells? The people who died from your poison? Vexnoth's silver eyes looked down at the table. That was a mistake. Desperate actions by a desperate leader. I offer full compensation to the victims and their families. And your tribute system? The payments you collected from thirsty settlements. Ended. Forever. We will not charge for water access again. Tay looked at Parkman and Cho Hyun, then back at the Highland Lord. There's one more condition. Your entire clan leadership must spend 6 months working in our training programs. You'll learn well maintenance, water management, and emergency repair. No exceptions. Vexnoth's advisors whispered frantically to each other. For proud clan leaders to work with their hands like common laborers was almost unthinkable. But their alternative was watching their people die of thirst. Agreed, Vexnoth said quietly. After the Highland delegation left, Ambassador Chen appeared via hologram from Earth. He looked concerned and tired. Tay, we need to talk about your status here. Earth Command is getting nervous about how much power you've accumulated. Some people are calling you a warlord. A warlord who's never fired a shot, Tay pointed out. Everything I've done has been voluntary cooperation. But you control the water supply of an entire planet. That's more power than most kings ever had. Tay walked to the observation window and looked down at the thriving world below. In the distance, he could see new human colony ships approaching the planet. Earth had decided that Kepler 442b was now safe for large-scale immigration, thanks to the stable water infrastructure he had built. I never wanted power, he said finally. I just want to solve a problem. But when you solve the most basic problem people have, they start depending on you for everything else. Gene K.O., now a senior engineer in charge of training new workers, joined the conversation. Engineer Tay, the colony ships are requesting landing permission. They want to establish settlements using our water management systems. Granted, Tay said, and make sure they understand the rules here. Everyone works together, everyone shares the water, and no one gets left behind. As the new ships descended toward the planet's surface, Tay realized that his accidental empire would keep growing, not through conquest or force, but through the simple fact that everyone needed what he provided. He had become the ruler of a world by teaching people how to dig wells.